There are several legendary creatures which are still supposedly existing, roaming about in the wild, with only blurry photos giving any sign of their existence. Now, by applying a little scientific rigour to these stories, there are any that we can rule out completely, and also working along the same lines, there are any that still could possibly exist, even if such a possibility is unlikely. Because there are so many of these creatures wandering around the world, and there's so many stories about them, could be ever looking into each and every one of them. Instead, we're going to narrow it down to 3 types of creatures, and given the way we look at those, should give enough insight into how we view the others. Now, there are 3 general types. Nessies, lake-dwelling creatures like the Loch Ness Monster. Yetis, very large, hairy, ape-like creatures including Sasquatch or Bigfoot and the abominable snowman. And finally, Megalodon, a huge prehistoric shark. For each of these creatures to exist, we need to overcome 3 key barriers at least. If they fail any one of these barriers, then comfortably dismissed as a myth. If they pass these barriers, they might exist, they haven't been proven to exist. And these 3 barriers are population numbers, food, and remains. Now, taking population numbers first, fairly obvious these creatures to exist in the wild, unless the very last one of their kind, has to be more than one of them. So how many are actually needed, the bare minimum to keep a population going generation after generation? Well, that number comes in at around 20 at least. Any less than 20 is a normal operating population, and things like accidents, birth defects, genetic anomalies would put the population on the edge of extinction. Less than this number, even random chance could mean that all the offspring of one generation could be males or all females, again wiping them out as a species. It's possible for an animal population to very temporarily dip below this number and survive, but for any prolonged period of time, less than 20 will soon see them extinct. Next we have food. The local environment must contain enough food to sustain the local population. The larger, more active animal, in general, the more food it will need. In some of the remote or in the hospital locations, food is very scarce or a very low nutritional value, meaning the animal will have to spend a greater time foraging over a wider area. This food, of course, is multiplied by the numbers in the population. Finally, we have remains. Once the animal dies, then traces of that animal are left around to be discovered. Now, depending on the location and other wildlife, would determine which remains are left behind, what signs are left, and for how long for. A large creature will take more time to vanish than a smaller one. The process of decomposition will become more apparent. Flesh, of course, will go before the bones and hair. A large animal will attract carrion such as crows and vultures to the carcass, again might be noticed. So how do the creatures stack up? Well, the Loch Ness Monster is out of luck. Since though the loch is rather deep, so finding bones or other remains might be very difficult, Loch actually has very little food or anything else of nutritional value in it. It's just not able to sustain something as large as a Loch Ness Monster. You can have things like pike and salmon in there, just at the least, but something the size of Nessie just couldn't find enough food to keep one going, let alone a group of them. Then we have the Yeti type creatures. Now those living in permanently snow-capped mountains are obviously not going to find enough food. However, those finding food in woods of remote parts of America, say, would be finding enough food to eat the breeding population. However, the woods are not remote enough that hunters or other people wandering in the woods wouldn't come across bones, teeth, and other remnants, which would be significantly different from other creatures native to those woods, and therefore we have to rule these out as well. Leaves us with Megalodon. Now, if it were to dwell in the deep ocean, certainly not find enough food to breed, certainly wouldn't leave any remains to be discovered, and even if it were caught in the net of a trawler or something like that, might be big enough to break the net and get free. So of the 3, Megalodon is still a possible somewhat unlikely survivor from earlier times.